Magomed Ankalaev just beat Bogdan Gustov via TKO in the 5th round, and he just put every single person who watched that fight to sleep. He's one of the greatest KO artists of all time because he knocked out about 100,000 people that were watching that fight. That was an absolute snooze fest, a boring fight. Ankalaev was just teeping, trying to kick at range. Both men were deciding not to really engage. Bogdan Gustov looked like and showed up like a prime Anthony Smith, and he just shelled up in the end and just took some punishment, and Mark Goddard called off the fight. The ground and pound was not even that insane, to be honest with you. Calling this fight a 5th round TKO is really a crime because it was more of a 5th round quitting from Bogdan Gustov. He just showed up for a paycheck, didn't even look like he really wanted to be in there. And quite frankly, the light heavyweight division has been cursed. Ever since Alex Pereira moved up, this division has been cursed. We have Carlos Ulberg, of all people, as champ with a fucking ACL tear out for over a year probably. Yuri Prohaska getting knocked out. Paulo Costa's there. We need Paulo Costa to save the light heavyweight division, to be honest with you, because right now it is looking terrible. One of the top contenders, Bogdan Gustov, just showed up for a paycheck. Look, I know it was on short notice, but he could have done a lot better than that. He could have done a lot better than that. For most of the fight, it looked like Bogdan didn't even want to engage. It literally looked like he didn't even want to engage. And Magomed Ankalaev is at fault as well for a lot of this because he wasn't pressing forward, he wasn't pressing the action. And he just looked like he was there for a paycheck. This makes me even more sad for Khalil Roundtree because Roundtree was supposed to be in there. I think Roundtree would have put a bad beating on Magomed Ankalaev. I think most of the light heavyweight top 5 would because he looked slow, he looked hesitant. Clearly, the Alex Pereira loss has done some psychological damage because he did not look like he wanted to engage or get hit. And so he really just heaped at range, kicked at range, threw a couple pitter-patter jabs here and there, smudged him up against the cage, got a couple takedowns, and controlled him on the ground for most of that fight. It was an absolute snooze fest of a fight, and the UFC, unfortunately, after the generational run that we've been on, from Strickland versus Chimaev to the White House card to Conor McGregor, we have to go back to these shitty main events. You know, Duplessis Usman was decent. Ankalaev versus Roundtree would have been decent because Roundtree's a warrior and he would have pushed forward and made that fight interesting. But we got Ankalaev versus Bogdan instead, which still on paper was a decent fight, but it ended up just being an absolute bore fest. Now we have a couple more Apex main events. The UFC is kind of dead for a little bit. But it's okay, man. We had our food and we ate it and we were eating good for a period of time. But right now we are in a reload phase of the UFC. We're back in the Apex. We're back in the shitty main events of a fight night card. And it was what it was. Magomed Ankalaev, the UFC is not going to let this guy sniff a belt for a long time. He's going to need to get 2 or 3 more wins. If you thought the UFC wasn't a fan of this guy before the Jan Blachowicz draw and before the Bogdan Gustov snooze fest, they definitely aren't a fucking fan of him now. They definitely aren't a big fan of him now. He is going to get some terrible treatment. They're probably going to give him another number 8 or number 10 guy in the world. They might rebook him versus Khalil Roundtree, honestly. I think that's the fight to make. Khalil Roundtree needs to beat this guy up. Yuri Prohaska needs to beat this guy up. Carlos Ulberg needs to beat this guy up, but I don't want to see him in a title fight. So we'll see what happens, man. Ankalaev with an absolute boring-ass performance, and the UFC is kind of dead for a little bit. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Peace.